All right, guys, we're going to end the show tonight with a top 5 players leaving and a top 5 players returning to our Clemson Tigers, leading it off with the top 5 players leaving Clemson at the end of 2024, heading into 2025. My number one guy on the list, Jordan, is R.J. Mickens. Huge loss. We've talked about it on the show numerous times about his overall consistency of play, the kind of player coach he was on the back end of that defense, ensuring everybody was lined up properly, and just the consistency that he performed with each and every game this past season. He leaves a huge hole in that safety room that is going to be difficult to fill this coming offseason. But that's why we got a new defensive coordinator. It's going to be his job to kind of figure out what we have there and who is best to fill those shoes of R.J. Mickens. But huge loss for the Tigers. But again, hope he has a great NFL career. He certainly gave Clemson all he could.
Yeah, absolutely. My number one is going to be Phil Maffa. I think because, there's a lot of question marks about the running back position heading into this year, and you don't really know what you have. You got to see a little bit of Jay Haynes, and obviously tore his ACL in the ACC championship game, and you didn't have him. And so now you're kind of in a position where you got to figure out what you have there. Obviously, incoming freshmen, Gideon Davidson has a lot of hype. He's going. I expect him to be in the mix, but at the end of the day, you don't have really any proven commodity in the running back room. Adam Randall making the transition, like there's bodies and there's some guys with some ability, but we have not seen much of it, and that's one thing that we're going to be closely watching during the spring. So Phil Maffa is my number one. Just tough to replace a guy that, when healthy was guaranteed 3 or 4 yards, basically, could fall forward, and the balance and patience as a runner are things that you can't teach. And as a senior leader of that offense, and I hated that his season ended the way it did. Because he was, especially early in the year, he was driving a lot of that offense. Kay Klubnik was putting up the numbers, but it was also because teams were worried about that run game. So that's I think we're going to miss him. Similar to kind of how you missed. I felt like you missed Will Shipley this year because you didn't have another guy, and so he's going to be my number one. But it was kind of tough to pick. Because you mentioned R.J. Mickens, that he was a guy that was up there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jacob, appreciate you stopping by. Have a good one, man. All right, my number 2 was a guy that you just mentioned, Phil Maffa. Obviously, for all the reasons that you stated, it's a huge hole in the running back room, and frankly, we don't know what's going to be. We don't know what's behind him. There's not a lot of proven guys behind him. You talk about Jay Haynes. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field. And even when he was healthy this season, he didn't get a lot of burn at the position. It was kind of Phil Maffa or bust this year, and ultimately, that ended up being one of the reasons that Clemson had some trouble towards the end of the season with consistently moving the ball. Was because the injuries to Phil Maffa. So what do you have behind him? Everybody thinks Gideon Davidson's going to walk right in and become the day one starter, and I really hope that happens. That's a lot as a freshman. That's a whole lot as a freshman. But he definitely has the talent in order to do something like that. You think about Adam Randall getting some burn over there in the spring. We'll see how that works out, but definitely a position of question. So Phil Maffa's number 2 on my list.
Yep. My number 2 is going to be R.J. Mickens. So we just kind of had ours flip-flopped.
That's right.
All the reasons you mentioned, tough to replace a level like that level of play at safety. Just really experienced, football player, multi-year starter. Meant a lot to the back end of that defense. Going to be tough to replace.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 3 on my list is Barrett Carter, linebacker. Obviously, we talked about last week's show about how the linebackers obviously didn't live up to their billing, their preseason billing, what we thought they would be in 2024. But Barrett Carter's still a huge loss to this Clemson Tigers defense. He's big, he's athletic, he's a guy that can get in there and stop the run. He's a guy that can cover when he's in the right position, right? He's shown the ability to do it at times, and ultimately hope that he has a great NFL career as well. He is my number 3. You got, you talk about the room. You got Wade Woodaz, Sammy Brown that came on really well towards the end of the season, freshman, and then some question marks after them. So we'll see how that room develops in the spring as well. So big hole there for Barrett Carter, multi-year starter.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder. Kind of, he's going to be my number 3 as well. And it kind of makes you wonder what, what it would have been nice if you could have got him for another year, and under a different defensive coordinator, different position coach, all that. But yeah,
he might have been able to if he would have had any eligibility.
Yeah,
it could have been a possibility.
But yeah, that is what it is when you're a guy that came in as good as he was. He played all 4 years.
All 4 years,
Never redshirted. So that's the way it is a lot of the time. So, his lead and just he was a leader. He was one of the heart, and he was a captain, one of the hearts and souls of the team. So. They're just going to be tough to replace it, and represented Clemson as well as anybody. I'm definitely going to miss seeing him out there. So, Barrett Carter is my number 3.
One of my favorite players to see interviewed, right? Like just through and through, a Clemson ambassador. Just a guy that articulates himself very well. Just gives very thoughtful answers when talking to the media. Just a fun guy to just hear interviewed and hear him talk about his journey to Clemson, his journey while he was at Clemson, a behind the scenes look at the coaches and stuff. It's a stand-up guy. So sad to see him go, but thankful that we got 4 years of a really great Barrett Carter. And, he'll be a Tiger for forever. Number 4 on my list was Jake Brenningstool, tight end. Obviously, we have a very talented tight end room. The emergence of Olsen Pat Henry this past season was, I think, somewhat surprising in the way that he asserted himself as that number 2 guy, really with his ability to block, which was not a strong suit coming out of high school for him.
No.
But, I think our tight end room's in really good hands, but you still got a hole there. With a guy the size of Jake Brenningstool, 6'6", massive reach, mismatch nightmare for, linebackers and nickel backers and guys that were trying to cover him. He was a really difficult body type to deal with in the middle of the field. Underutilized quite a bit during his career at Clemson, but still set records and is going to be missed off this Clemson Tiger team for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you don't get many guys with his length and athleticism and pass catching ability at the tight end position. And he's a lot of fun to watch. One of the best to come through Clemson for sure. So it's definitely going to be greatly missed. But I do like what you're bringing back in that room and the talent and potential there. You already mentioned Olsen Pat Henry. Obviously, Christian Bentaker, we didn't have to burn his red shirt, a guy that I think is going to leave as one of the best when it's all said and done. I think you got some options there. And Josh Sapp returning, like you got some pieces to work with.
Yep. All right, I'll move on to my number 5, and that is Peyton Page, defensive tackle, a guy that played a lot of snaps as a Clemson Tiger. He was kind of, just a guy there for a long time. Had a really good season this past season. With getting a guy like DeMonte Capehart back, it definitely lessens the blow of a Peyton Page leaving. But just his athleticism from the defensive tackle position, I think, is what really made Peyton Page stand out. His ability to get to the passer, just big plays that he made that pop into my head from his career here at Clemson, and certainly a big loss to that defensive tackle group. But again, another position group that is in really good hands with the depth that is there. You think about a Peter Woods, DeMonte Capehart, Stephon Green, Heaven Brown, Shule, all those guys that are still there, but still going to miss a veteran guy like Peyton Page in the room.
Yeah, and one of the senior leaders, 4-year player. He was certainly, and one of the, he brought a lot of energy to that room. I mean, he's really, really funny guy to listen to. And just he was definitely one of the jokesters on the team, and so he was just a bright, personality to have on that team, and obviously coupled with his talent. He was a lot of fun to watch. Excited to see where he ends up at the next level. For my number 5, I'm going to go Marcus Tate. 4-year starter at guard. It's just a guy that's hard to replace, and that's one of the things that's going to be addressed during this spring is that battle at left guard. See who ultimately steps up there. It's tough to replace. I mean, it's funny. You just looking back at how far he came. Marcus did. His first start was in that 2021 season opener against Georgia when you had all those injuries, and he was thrown to the wolves, man. But he was a very, very solid football player. Like I said, 4-year starter. He dealt with injuries, played through injuries at different points in his career. Just happy for him that he's going to get a chance to play at the next level because the injuries were a problem for him at times, and it's tough to replace that. As many snaps and starts as he had, that's tough to replace. Even though I do think you have some options there.
Yeah, and that's really the thing when you think about a guy like Marcus Tate is the experience that you're replacing. Yeah, does Clemson have uber talented offensive linemen behind him that are probably going to step in and do a really good job? You think about Harris Sewell, you think about
Colin Sadler,
and
the younger guys, Mason Wade, and you've got some options for sure.
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys, but really the thing that you will be missing regardless of who steps into that spot is that experience that a Marcus Tate brought to the game. Just seeing so many defensive fronts, seeing so many snaps, so many reps at protection and things like that. There's nuances to the game that can only be taught by experience. And when you lose a guy with as many starts as him, there's always going to be a hole. But luckily for the Tigers, there's a lot of young guys there waiting to fill that role as best they can. But yeah, certainly a hole there. Would have brought back all 5 starting offensive linemen had Marcus Tate had any eligibility. But again, he's a guy that was just flat out of eligibility. There was no way for him to come back.
Yep. When you have those guys that are too good to keep off the field as a freshman, that tends to be how it goes.
Yeah. You only get 4 years. So he got his 4 and played extremely well.